I'm going to go ahead and get started. We are excited but also sad to say, the last in our virtual roundtable series. Our team has been thinking about how we can continue to virtually engage with all of you throughout the semester. So more to come on that soon. But for the time being, this is the last in the current roundtable series. As you guys know, it's been such a joy to meet every few weeks and talk about all the challenges we've been facing as a community, be it changes to student services, changes to the internship program, how we advise students. Also, just last time thinking about how do we recruit and how do we talk to students when they're virtual, they're not with us in person. And so it's been nice to really contemplate these changes together. I'm excited for today's session because we're going to talk about the next generation, right? The future, looking at the students, the workforce, how we're supporting students, and how all of that is going to change and the data behind it. So before I give the whole presentation, a few housekeeping rules. One, the session is going to be recorded. So if you don't want to appear in the recording, please just have your video turned off. No hard feelings, we completely understand. Two, right now everyone is muted, but we will have a portion of this presentation that's discussion based. So during that time, please stay muted unless you're speaking. Reed, who's our tech support again, is actually going to copy and paste the discussion questions into the chat now. And that's because we want you all to be thinking about these questions as we go through today's presentation, because we really want to hear from you. What's going on your campuses. So without further ado, today's presenters, so you guys know me, I'm Mari, and I'm a manager of the newly named Institutional Partnerships and Admissions team here at the Washington Center. But more importantly, today we have Carmenchu Mendiola, or Menchu, here to present with us. Menchu is TWC's Chief Marketing Officer and leads the Institutional Partnerships and Admissions team. She has more than 18 years of experience in corporate identity, brand management, strategic marketing, and digital strategy. She's responsible for overseeing TWC's institutional partnerships, admissions, marketing, and communication teams. She also leads the Washington Center's institutional brand and oversees development and execution of integrated marketing campaigns for diverse audiences. She's also, on top of all those things, responsible for managing TWC's PR, media relations, crisis communication, and organizing our digital strategy. For those of you who don't know, Menchu is a TWC alumna. She did our internship program. She has an MA in strategic marketing as well as a BA in communications. She's originally from Mexico, but currently lives in Washington, D.C. So today we are here to have Menchu talk to us about TWC's future, but also a lot of the research she's been doing on our student populations. And the questions we proposed to her were, how can we design experiences and evolve learning outcomes beyond the standard internship to create a connection between theory and practice? And then also, how can we continually support our students' transition from college to career? So without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic on to Menchu, who can speak to you a lot more in depth about these topics.
Hello, everybody. It's great seeing you today. Thank you for taking the time to join us in our last session. We know it's, of course, the start of the semester for many of you, so taking the time to join us means a lot to us. Today, I'm going to talk about something that TWC spends a lot of time thinking about, researching, which is thinking about the next generation student, also about what is the next generation workforce. So how are we connecting our recent graduates to what's relevant in the market? And lastly, I'm going to touch on some of the research that TWC has done to really think what is still relevant of our program and what are other offerings that we can that we're thinking about for the today's student. So the first section is about the next generation student. And I actually didn't want to spend a lot of time specifically on this section, just because I know that you are all experts of the current generation. There's a lot that's been written. So we're gonna just touch on this subject briefly. And so the next generation student, as we know, it's more diverse, it's more inclusive. They really value and talk about equity, inclusion, diversity. Technology is an extension of themselves and the way they go through life, and they expect as well many of their experiences to integrate seamlessly in their lives. It's also, or what we've seen even in our own experience working with the students, we have more non-traditional students, or what is considered non-traditional. It's cost conscious. They appreciate the transparency in pricing, and also think about return on investment. And they are, something that we've seen and we have experienced. They value customization, the creation of these frictionless experiences. I think at TLC we always think about, we're not competing necessarily with other, as much as other internship sites, as much, internship programs, as much as the experiences that are created by an Amazon, Facebook, Google. They've all raised the bar in terms of customer and student experience, and that's why it's for a 45-year-old organization, for example, we always have to evolve to maintain that level of relevancy for our students. So, one of the things that I've read a lot and participated in some discussions is about higher ed's reality. So we know that over the last 10 years, higher ed institutions across the country has been experiencing declines in enrollment for two primary reasons. One is, of course, demographic, and the other, it's on the economic trends. So what has happened is, we've had this great economy. Of course, the COVID-19 has changed all of that. But up until 6 months ago, we had this great economy. And now, what has happened with COVID-19 is, what I've heard is that higher ed institutions used to think that we had until 2026, or maybe some articles talk about 2028, to really think about how do we reshape higher ed, how do we create new programs or evolve our programs. But now what's happening today, and the fact that many students and parents are really thinking about, is college worth it? Is the virtual experience as worth it as the in-person experience? Then COVID-19 has accelerated many of the changes that were already coming, and it's not only for higher ed, but it's for all organizations and companies. So when I want to spend some time talking about the next generation workforce, but before I do that, I wanted to share with you one of the definitions of work that I really like. It comes from Gary Bowles, and he is a chair for the future of work at Singularity University. And he defines work as human skills applied to problems. So no matter, if it's about, cleaning a dirty floor, or coming up with a complex market strategy, we humans create value by applying our skills to solve problems in the world. And I think this is so relevant, because we're gonna be talking about upskilling, reskilling as some of the trends that we're seeing in the next generation workforce. So I really like the fact that all the shifts and the changes that we're seeing, we're in the midst of this huge change and the shift. Why? Because we have different problems, we have tools and new tools that can help us solve those problems. So what happens for the new generation workforce is that they also have to adapt and use these new tools and understand what are the skills that will help humans solve problems these days. So I have an 11-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I remember when my son entered elementary school, this was something that was very interesting to me to hear that in 2016, a study by the World Economic Forum said that children entering primary school in 2016, 65% of them will ultimately end up working in completely new job types that don't exist. And this is relevant because we are not going to, our students are not going to be able to plan this perfect career path, because there's so much that we don't know, and the jobs are going to change so much from now until 2030 at least. And I'm not sure if I actually, at the end of the presentation, I'm adding some links to some of the articles that I really like and I think they're relevant. One of the articles is from our career advisor, Chris Messaros. And I don't know if you've had the opportunity to attend one of his sessions where he applies scales theory to your career. And he really talks about how career services can help students really think about careers in a very flexible way, and focusing more on skills development and transferring skills, as opposed to thinking that you have to have certainty about what you're going to be doing in the next 10 years. So what we see, because of all of the changes that are happening, it's the need for lifelong learning, and also for the need of many people, including us probably, or it's certainly for our team, the need for skilling and upskilling. And I think about this when I started my work in communications. It was all about print production. It was 4-color prints, and it was snail mail. And I think in the middle of my career, everything changed and became digital. And I've had to take so many courses. I've had to continuously read about marketing, understanding, get the training, because what happened in communications and marketing, it's just became data driven, very technical. So if you think about, in the past, you used to create a plan, execute it for a year, evaluate it at the end. Digital gave us the opportunity to evaluate our work every day, and the ability to update it. And I think there's just many industries where I see, the need of continuously improving in your skills. I wanted to add a note about a study by McKinsey that says that by 2030, 75 million to 375 million workers would be displaced as a result of an accelerating digital economy, with large swaths of the workforce requiring retraining. And now, with COVID-19, 195 million jobs worldwide will be displaced in this quarter alone. And that's according to the UN's labor body. This is, it's not to scare ourselves, but it's something we think about all the time, that there's this misconception that training is limited only to the early years of your career, and then other skills will be picked up on the job, where the reality is that we're just going to have, and our students and even ourselves, to invest all the time in getting and acquiring new skills to continue to solve, solve problems. That part of reminded me to one of articles in our blog, and I also added a link to this that was written by our president, Chris Norton, and he used to work at Goldman Sachs. And he makes an analogy about managing your career as your portfolio, where it's diversified, where you are constantly updating it. And there's a quote from his article that says, "Well, it's been true for some time that people won't work at a single organization across a career, they likely won't work a single career either. The need to upskill on a routine basis is a new reality." And he also talks about an article that he really liked, that references a 60-year curriculum, that there is an opportunity for higher ed institution, or even for the Washington Center, to embrace this new dynamic and provide that the reskilling and the upskilling to our students so that we also actually have an opportunity to serve them for a longer period of time than 4 years, or when it comes to TLBC's case, for a semester. I wanted to bring, just connect everything to the importance of skills. And after cloud computing and blockchain, it's very interesting that creativity is now the first in-demand skill in the world. And that is why employers are ready to invest in learning and development initiatives, and encouraging, soft skills like creativity. Um, in 2020, and this is one of the reports from LinkedIn, if you think about those soft skills, there's creativity, persuasion, collaboration. Of course, adaptability is one of the skills that are so relevant for our virtual world, and emotional intelligence. The fact that that you can and use these skills to work well with others, to create, also to, again, coming back to creative problem solving. That's always something that, okay, so we have all of these problems in the world, we have this new technology that exists, so how can you actually come up with a solution that nobody has come up with yet? So entrepreneurship, that's why it's also so important these days. And then when you look at hard skills, if you think about blockchain, cloud computing, analytical reasoning, those are some skills that we, probably we never heard about blockchain, or we heard about it a couple of years ago. And that's, going back to the need to think about long life learning, and always looking at what are the skills that we need, because the ones that we'll need in 5 years probably are, we don't even know about them. When we think about hard skills, one that I believe it's so relevant for our students, and I wish, all of them could actually, get training on, it's user experience design, or perhaps it's customer experience. And thinking about, for example, for our political scientists, or if you are going to work in the government, for example, you will have to be designing experiences for citizens, and you will need to think about them in a way that it's relevant, using the tools of today, creating this seamless experience. So I think that all of us, in everything that we do, we are redesigning, rethinking what a good experience is in 2020. And it's still, even though it's a hard skill, and it feels that it's technical, it is really, there's so many of these skills that are also relevant for our students who are in the social sciences. So thinking about how are we also incorporating and trying to instill in our students the need to understand what are those skills that everyone really wants. I think it's important. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm sure you are familiar with the competencies assessment that we do at TWC, and it's specifically, we do this because that is, when we are measuring those soft skills, we want the students to understand that where are they in the skills, what are things that they should be working on. But I think most importantly is, having that reference from your internship supervisor, that it's, like that's the narrative that tells this is how this student is demonstrating these soft skills or competencies. It's so important because that is a really great reference to where they are. Since COVID-19, and that's something that I'm not sure if someone in our series talked about, but NACE in the assessment that we do added the ability to work remotely and the ability to work independently as two competencies that we are now assessing in our internship program, and that are very important also, again, because our students will have the ability to speak about those skills when they interview for a job. I also wanted to touch on the global trends in terms of workforce as a whole. And there are 4 trends that came out in 2020. I think like all the trends are connected by the word empathy. And I find it very interesting because the first trend across the globe is the design of the employee experience. And this is a huge shift in the way we think about work. So now, the thinking is that companies will work for employees and not just the other way around. That if we want to keep and nurture great talent, we have to collaborate. We have to bring that empathy and understand what employees want and actually design the work experience around them. And I before or right before COVID-19, I started writing an article for our blog about the internship experience. So going back to my reference on UX, or user experience, or customer experience, this employee experience is EX. And I was thinking about IX as something that TLC has always talked and talked about. In 2013, I worked in a project called the Internship Bill of Rights, and I think that was the spirit behind the Internship Bill of Rights was for TWC to establish series of guidelines or best practices on how employers could really think about creating an exceptional experience for interns, keeping that internship experience in mind. So for example, things like we always talk about with our internship sites, creating a great onboarding experience for interns, bringing them in and really showing what the culture is, but also involving them in projects and also meetings, or sharing your network. Those are some of the things that came out of the Internship Bill of Rights. So I'm very happy to see that this is a trend that it's actually not only now that we think about for interns, but for employees. The second trend is people analytics, and it's how do you use data to draw meaningful insights that can inform talent decisions at every level. So for example, some of the things that we could measure and use could be, of course, measuring employee performance. This is something that we've done, but now we probably have, using technology, more data to measure it better. Identifying skill gaps. Again, there's so much talk about skills, and also using the data to identify what are those skills, and also predicting candidate success. The third trend is internal recruiting. And this contradicts a little bit what I referenced in terms of Chris's article about you're gonna work in many places. I think that's been the trend, for the past 10 years. You see people really jumping from, organization to organization, not really, the thought that someone's gonna stay in a job for 20 years. It's crazy now for many people. But it's interesting that the third trend is it's actually about internal recruiting and drawing the talent from within the organization. And how do you do that? Really understanding how are you going to make it for the employee worthwhile to stay and grow. And for that, you need that understanding of what the employee wants. And also, I think, like, we've seen that, people move from job to job because you just want to move faster and get maybe more pay. Of course, everyone cares about benefits, but in this case, I think companies worldwide are understanding that talent is limited, and also that it costs a lot of money to onboard and hire new people and train them and retrain them. So we see that third trend. The fourth trend is that multi-generational workforce. So now we're seeing, from Gen Z to baby boomers and beyond, we understand that good talents will prove ageless, that baby boomers and Generation Z may have more in common that we could, think. But that we also have to consider that our different generations value different things, and that's the design of the employee experience, and also trying to tailor that experience to the employee becomes important. So that one size fits all, when you have we are all expecting these great experiences all around, and we value different things in the different stages of our life. And the last one, which we are, we're seeing now more and more, but this is not something that came out of COVID. This is something that we had identified, as I said, important for Generation Z, but also important as a trend overall, the need for equity, diversity, and inclusion as a central priority in the workplace. And now we've seen it more and more, I'm sure, in all our LinkedIn feeds and our social media. So that's, those are the main points that I wanted to cover in terms of what we're seeing for the next generation workforce. And now I'm just going to dedicate a little bit of time to talk about the next generation TWC, how we've been thinking about, the future. Which, I think with COVID now, we said like the future is now. It is what we do today, not in 5 years, that matters. And I wanted to share with you at the end of 2019, TLBC conducted a study. We spoke with about 100 of our stakeholders. We typically do this every few years. We talk to our institutional partners, to alumni, our students, and this time we also talked to external companies. We also wanted to look at and speak with organizations that were more of startups and thinking about what are they doing, what's new, and also look at how were we perceived. So I wanted to share some of the takeaways from this analysis. I think what strikes me is that 7-8 months ago, we looked at all of these trends and they seem like, yeah, that makes sense. What do we do, with all of this information? And 6 months later with COVID, as everything accelerates, now it's so clear that those trends were already emerging. They just, this COVID just accelerated everything. So when we looked at the critical elements for a successful internship or professional experience in college, we looked at some of the elements that seem to be timeless, so that they were relevant in 75 and they're still relevant today. So many of those elements are still true. So networking and mentorship, that's so critical. Building your first network. Having someone who believes in you, who tells you that yes you can, and it's going to push you harder. It's so relevant still. The professional and soft skills, not only we see this in all the trends, but I think it's when in our conversations with alumni and with our students, they still they also think that that's such an important component that you can actually develop or put in practice some of those skills when you are participating in your internship. At the end of the presentation, I added an article from our Chief Academic Officer, Kelly Eaton. She wrote, earlier this year about why soft skills are a hard sell. And I think she explains it very well when she talks about, sometimes in the classroom, it's you, right? It's you mastering the content, acing the test. And, and we see that in the world of work, your ability to work with others and all of those soft skills, persuasion, really understanding, emotional intelligence. Those are things that like you bring all the knowledge from college and then, apply it in this great laboratory, unscripted environment, and in your internship. And that's, it is just a great place in those skills. And us, for example, that's why TLC feels it's so important to measure those competency, those soft skills as something that, that piece of reflection at the end of our program, so that we still see it's relevant. Clear expectations and feedback. Again, I think it's something that that we've always believed in, and that's why we have our, our semester review with our internship sites, the end of the semester review. So having those, expectations at the beginning of the semester of the program to understand, what are the goals that you have in your internship, and then at the end getting that feedback. And also the reason why we believe that 360 feedback that's coming from your peers, from your supervisor, from your colleagues, it's also very meaningful work. This is important for us because it's less about the 14 weeks or the amount of time, but it's about the quality of the internship and the work that you do. The reflection piece, which, as you know, it's a big piece, and that's incorporated into our program. What we hear, even though our program, it's all about the credit and that's how it's structured, for the students, what they said is like, if credit comes, that's great. But, for me, it would be more important to get, this quality experience, my clear expectation, the networking, and building it, more than the credit. If I get the credit, it's great. But I would still do it without the credit because I really want the experience. The other takeaway, it was about customized programs to fit the participants' needs, and that's something that we have been, starting to think about and experimenting even with our virtual program, where it's it's not so much about us creating something and then of course expecting that the student fits in it neatly, but how can we offer more opportunities or distinct experiences so that it fits more of that lifestyle of the students. So for example, we saw this summer, we had students with kids. We had students who were keeping a full-time job, and the ability to review content, on demand, that, that it's something that virtual allows you to do, has allowed us to test some of those ideas. And lastly, everyone talked about, of course, leveraging the power of any alumni network to continue to build your network. Some other, trends, measurable and tangible skill sets that can be shared with future employers. People talk about competency-based assessments, badges, and credentialing. I know that, TWC experimented a bit with a badge last, I think last semester, in the fall of 2019. And one thing that I think that it was clear to us perhaps is that yes, you can create a badge, but what people care about is that badge is recognized by the industry. So I think like making a tight connection between industry, employers, and if we're gonna, create badges or credentials, I think that's so important that it has that connection and that validation. Otherwise, probably students are not super interested in just getting a badge for the sake of getting a badge. The growing, again, this is from 2019, but we sensed and heard of this growing consciousness around equity, diversity, and inclusion. And, the thought that TLC should ensure that people from all backgrounds, socioeconomic status, have access to the same experiences. Scholarships, overall cost, paid internships, that's something that, we hear, loud and clear. And also the conversation around greater mental health support systems, wellness programs, and helping students not only think about work and the hard skills or the soft skills, but also helping them understand how do I achieve this work-life balance, as something that was relevant to not only students but also alumni and partners. So some of the ideas that we generated back then is it was very clear that people were interested in virtual and online experiences. I think that if you think about in December 2019, we were nowhere near to being able to offer a virtual internship. And I think, we always thought it's going to be such a hard sell for our partners, right? Are they willing to give credit for online experiences? Yeah, we didn't think. We thought it was a hard sell. And then the other piece was if our partners have worked with us for, many of us for years, decades, 45 years, are they willing to have a virtual internship? So again, that acceleration, if you fast forward 6 months later and we graduated 550 students from our summer program, where 330 were from our federal program. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the program, but 550 virtual in internships, including our federal agencies that agreed to go through all the security clearance and allow students to do the program virtually. And I think a big piece of that has to do with that equity and diversity and the conversations that we had about, are you you have the ability to provide these experiences, right? We had these conversations with our internship partners and say, can you, right? Like we know it's new and there's so much pressure, but just we felt very strong that students, the opportunities were not there for many of the students. I've read a stat that says 70% of summer internship fell through for many students in the US. And I think for us, it was a big triumph that we were able to convince so many internship sites to go through with their program. Badging and credentialing based on skills that employers want. Again, yes, we tested the badging, but the connection with the industry, so it's so important. Connect students to job opportunities. So not stopping at just, okay, you graduated. And I think for TWC, in many cases, I think we're also bound by our history, right? And our history, it's long, 4 decades. But thinking that in the past, our students didn't really seek employment because most of them were going back to school. We're seeing an increase of seniors who want this as their, capstone experience at the, that this is at the end so that I'm ready to get a job. And this is something that we've seen over the past few years, but traditionally we work with so many seniors, sophomores that were going back to school. They were not really seeking employment. But now we see, again, when we think about adapting our program, our services to the realities of our students, then we have to think, well, we have a good percentage now that are seniors, as well as we have sophomores and juniors. Develop more customized professional development programming. And this is something that we tested this summer. I'm not sure if you had the opportunity or when Kelly spoke with the group to talk about how students really value the ability to choose. We had 31 sessions and they were able to choose, well, they were required to attend 8, but they could attend all of them. And the design was thinking about all of the subjects that they would be interested in, and for us to measure satisfaction, understanding which sessions were the most successful, and really continue to adapt and do more of what our students want, and really understand where we what are the themes that they're not interested in, but especially the choosing, crafting your own experience. Offer project-based work. This is something that we're seriously thinking about right now, in terms of, we are looking at the concept of micro internships. Of course, we see that in many cases, we've always worked with students who have the luxury of taking, the 14 weeks, the 10 weeks, and dedicate, full time to this program. But we also know that there are many students that they cannot do that, but they're seeking an experience. So, some of the questions that we've raised is, how might TWC design also an experience that is high quality, but it could be more flexible, in terms of time, and just more flexible, that adapts more to the students' need. And it's not a replacement, of course, of the work that we do, because we're still seeing that, our program works very well for so many students, but also, it's when students and alumni are really talking about equity, diversity, inclusion, us being able to offer federal internships. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but we're managing a program called the Foreign Affairs IT. And that's for Department of State, and it's a combination of getting scholarship money, internships, and a career path at the Department of State. And then, thinking about, can we do project-based work, or just the internship, and maybe students can take courses at their home institution. So we're looking at all of these different options, and develop opportunities for non-traditional students. I don't know if you're familiar. We work with, we have a program for veterans, but always thinking about socioeconomic backgrounds. I think, like, I almost already talked about this, but we believe that our in-person academic internship programs still relevant for many students. We actually welcome 111 students last week. And even though our students are mostly interning virtually, it's amazing to see how many students are still about, the DC experience, and we see that as still relevant. Just as a, it's a recap of what I already spoke. We can and should be designing additional options that provide flexibility to students who cannot take that full semester. And what I referenced in terms of the FFAIT, there are also fellowships, other opportunities that students can tap into, and then helping them understand what possibilities exist, which is so aligned to our mission to help all students tap into these professional experiences that can help them launch a career. But I think that launching that career, what we see, can take many shapes and forms. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Menchu. I think that was super helpful. We, as I said earlier, wanted to create this space for discussion, question and answers. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can all see each other as we discuss what these questions are in the chat box. Also, I see some people have already been bringing up really great points in the chat box. So if you want to hop on to talk about those, we'd love to hear any questions you have for Menchu on what she presented, but then also these questions on your campuses.
I'll just read a couple of the submissions that came into the chat. Carla at ETSU noted that in the Honors College at ETSU, they're working to create additional internship opportunities for students, since not all of them can come to TWC, and also, there's more demand now in this age, especially for flexible opportunities. And then Robin at USF mentioned that in the last year, she's seen a lot more students coming to her with kind of a more preconceived notion of what they want to get out of an internship experience, and wanting TWC to be able to fit their vision, as opposed to the other way around, of kind of having TWC, or having their vision adapt to fit TWC. Those were a couple of comments that came in, and again, we're happy to hear others from folks who have questions or things to share.
So I think for us, we believe that, okay, so this is what we see on this side. So we would love to hear from you and see you maybe disagree, or are you kind of like seeing the same need or want from students to say, I want more options. I want to be able to do this to fit my lifestyle. Not everyone can plan those, like just at TWC or a full-time semester experience as part of their 4-year program. Do you, or is there something else that maybe we might be missing? Because it would help us so much while now we're thinking about our, new offerings, and having the luxury of having you here. It's just great. So if you could share.
I think Kay also put in the chat that students are, they have a particular internship in mind, and sometimes they're not very flexible with that. I won't speak for our pre-arrival advisors, but I think we get some students like that as well. What I hear is we get sort of the gamut of students who come in, they know exactly what they want. But then we also get students who come in and have, they're like, I know I need an internship, but I'm not really sure what I need to do. And so it's sort of a spectrum that we see here at TWC.
I think our students here at Hiram, some of them kind of want to know, like they go into an internship thinking like, I'm going to do this because it's going to help me do this later on. So some of our students who do go on to the Washington Center, they do it because they want to end up in DC or have like some kind of connection in DC. So do you have any data that shows how many of your students after the program end up back in DC after they graduate or their full-time job or anything like that?
We, I think we don't have any specific data as, a percentage of the 60,000 alumni specifically, because our records weren't that great until recently. But our biggest concentration of alumni resides in DC. We have, I would say that we have contacts, at least, I must say like 3,000 or more that are still working in DC. So we know that, and I think it's became very evident with our fall semester that DC is such a huge attraction for students who attend TWC, as opposed to just any internship. The city plays such a crucial role in the decision.
Anecdotally, I like to say that if I'm at like a networking happy hour and I mention I work for TWC, either the person I'm talking to did TWC, they hosted a TWC intern, or they have a friend who has done one of those two. So I feel like TWC has a really good representation in DC. Also, just in this panel alone, Reed, Menchu, and I are all alums of the program. So you can find us pretty much everywhere.
I have a question, and admittedly, I had to step out for a few moments, so I may have missed when you explained about this. I think the idea of shorter-term internship options is really attractive. The only thing that I wonder about is how that would work in terms of like the semester and disrupting the semester, because when we send students for a full semester or summer, well, obviously summer is different because they're not normally enrolled in classes, but when we send them for a semester, they're enrolled at ETSU still full time and earning those credits. But if they were to do a shorter term internship, I wonder how we would manage it in terms of the rest of their schedule for the semester.
So I think that's a great question, because I think there are many ways to approach this. One that we've been hearing lately, and again, I think for TLC it's important that we're not creating something in here in DC and then go out and expect people to to think it's great. We are paying so much attention to what we're hearing from our partners. So one idea that we've been hearing lately is more of the idea of a part-time internship. It's 20 to 25 hours a week, and perhaps then students can enroll in their courses at their home institution virtually. You could do this online, or you could do this in person. I think for the institution, perhaps thinking how many credits would we be able to give for this type of internship. And also, I think what it provides the flexibility that you don't have, if you have certain courses and requirements, you can still enroll in the course. You can still do it at the same time that you have this internship experience. But perhaps, unless but you wouldn't necessarily be, for example, getting credit for the course in DC. So it's not about adding lots of components on top of it, but more of isolating the internship experience, making it part-time so that the students can have time to enroll and take their courses from their home institution. So the credit, it wouldn't be an issue there. And that's something that we've been hearing, which is from our partners. It's different from thinking about a micro internship, right? Micro internship, the employer sets the hours. It could be 10 hours, 20 hours. And then the student says, oh, this fits my schedule. And it's not about the credit at all. It is about the experience. So the one that we have been thinking about, it's more on how do we also fit within the university in a way that will make sense to our partners. So that,
Yeah, thank you. That makes sense. I think I as I said, since I stepped out, I misunderstood some of what you're saying. So you're not talking necessarily about creating micro internship opportunities in DC, because obviously that would be problematic in terms of students' participation on campus. But you're talking about, and maybe an experience where a student could go to DC, but instead of working full time, they would also be able to enroll in other classes at their home institution that they might need to take to meet certain requirements for graduation. Okay, is that
yes,
right?
absolutely.
Okay.
Is that something that you think would make sense?
Yeah, I think potentially that could work for some of our students. Yeah, I think so. Thanks.
Great. Thank you.
And it could also, just to chime in, it could also work in reverse of what you just described, Carla, where potentially students could stay on campus but do their part-time internship virtually. So I think it could be one way or the other, depending on students' needs, school's needs. So
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're thinking about.
I think that sounds good.
Well, I know we're getting close to time. I hate to cut everything off, but I also want to be cognizant that it is the start of the semester and we are all very busy. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly. Again, as Minchu said, we have a few resources and just next steps. So Minchu, do you want to talk about these blogs?
Yeah, I just, I referenced some of the blogs that we've written well, before, I think all of these were before COVID, but are relevant to the presentation in case you would like to read some of these. And if you're interested in some of the stats, we have all that information. If you're interested, I can share with you as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay. And then in terms of next steps, as I said, this is our last in this series, but we are thinking about other ways we can virtually engage with our liaisons. But please also stay in touch with our team. You should all have an institutional partnerships manager that you're working with, either myself, Reed, Blair, or Sierra. So reach out to us anytime. Also, if you're not sure who to reach out to, who to talk to, you can write to institutionalpartnerships@twc.edu. We will be sharing a recap of today's session along with the blogs. And if you have more questions, if you want to explore ideas, like Minchu said, we really are right now in the process of talking to our partners about what would be of value to your students. So yeah, please share that feedback with us via email. And thank you all so much for coming today. And we will virtually talk soon.